Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by Blue Water Climate Control. Remember, you can, if you have a need for your climate system, you can reach out to them in Knoxville at 865-299-2290. You can find them online at bluewaterclimatecontrol.com or on Twitter, or the Twitter, as college coaches refer to it, at BlueH2O_climate. With Jesse Simonton, Rob Lewis, and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us on this Tuesday. What an eventful Monday it has been. A couple things. Gator Dog, congratulations.
Cash that over.
You win the over. Okay, so gifts are coming to you. It's not an Oscars gift bag, but we got some gifts coming to you. But you won that one going away. Secondly, it's funny. 2 weeks ago, Georgia was falling apart because they started losing everybody. Sunday, South Carolina was falling apart because they're losing everybody. Now Tennessee, according to everybody else in the SEC, has been cast into they're falling apart because they're losing everybody. Bottom line, I think as you said a couple of weeks ago, welcome to life in the SEC, right?
Coaches just like to move around, man. I mean, me and Jesse were talking before the podcast started. I mean, Rumpf. What's his last 10 years look like?
He is the ultimate puddle jumper. You know, Clemson, Alabama, Texas, Florida, and now he's looking to kind of, make that next career move to try to get into the more comfortable coaching life that is the NFL. But Rumpf not getting the Giants job, AP, I didn't know if his NFL opportunity was maybe not going to come for another year. So that one, maybe when we got those texts Sunday night and started tracking that one down, a little bit surprised that one. The Rocker one has been that one has been the writing on the wall. And as AP has said,
the Rocker shell has went, for the people that can't see the ad man.
Story written.
Yeah.
The Rocker story has been.
The Rocker has, yeah. They're parting ways. Vanderbilt, because he interviewed there and they lowballed him money wise and he didn't go.
Off the field.
Off the field roll. Now to South Carolina.
Retired was one.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been all, but that symbolizes kind of that relationship with Jeremy and him, like the last back part of the season. I mean, it was everywhere. He was staying, he was going, he everything in between.
The Rocker story. The only thing that's been in there longer was the Jay Hardy commitment story.
Yeah,
it's probably true. But with
and the only person that's seen that video is Alex118, and he keeps asking me if he can use that as his avatar.
So on Rocker, I mean, I think his contract was expiring, so we all thought he was going to move somewhere, do something. Someone asked me, why would you go to South Carolina given the situation and everything else? He's resetting his clock with a 2 or 3 year deal.
Yeah,
I mean, he's getting guaranteed money.
It's smart for him. And look, I understand there's some, and I said this on the radio on Monday, and there's absolutely some recruiting frustrations, I think, with that spot. But you can not deny what Rocker has done throughout his career, but then specifically the last 2 years at Tennessee in terms of developing and on-field coaching. He inherited a group 2 years ago in year one at Tennessee that was not considered to have that much talent or talent that had been really tapped. He gets Kyle Phillips and Shad Tuttle to be legitimately looked at by the NFL and earn places on the roster. And then this last season with kind of a hodgepodge group, they improved dramatically in terms of run defense. They get more pressures. You start to see some movement and stuff out of a guy like Matthew Butler, and now they're going to return every single body plus Emmett Gooden in 2020. So Jimmy, is going to inherit a nice group, but it's going to be on to him now, I think, to really elevate that recruiting deal because, talking to folks, he doesn't have like a huge track record as some, Bulldog Dynamite recruiter either. His best asset seems to be what he did development-wise with Za'Darius and Bud Dupree and some of the other guys at Kentucky.
Well, and I think but as you look at it,
he is younger, 10 years younger.
But he makes a lot of sense from the standpoint of he's a guy that Derek Ansley knows well.
Right.
And so when you're talking about marrying front end to the back end, I think if you're Derek Ansley, Robin, you're a back end guy. You know the passing game. You know the secondary play. You got to have a guy on the front end up there that you completely trust. That's your guy. I think this hire, not so much Shelton Felton, not so much. Even Brian Niedermeyer. I think this hire was more about Ansley and Ansley's comfort level, because those two have to work together, or you got a bad.
You got to be able to
defense.
speak the same language.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing for me is, like, on the whole, this staff, I think Ossavet is a hungry, motivated guy. I think Shelton Felton, while he's 39, he's a hungry, motivated guy. Jimmy Brumbaugh, I think, is more along the lines of, I don't mean career like arc or track record, but I'm just saying I think he's more along the lines of a Jim Chaney, a guy that's very capable. He's not going to be this ace bulldog recruiter, but he's also not going to be a liability. That's the kind of the thing when I've talked to people today is he's very capable. That's the thing with Tracy. I think if this was just an on the field thing, I think Tracy would have stayed here 1,000 times, but he just didn't want to recruit, and I think it's a much more laid back. I mean, I know Will's kind of still coming, but out of all the Saban disciples, Will Muschamp has adopted, since he's been at South Carolina, a more laid back approach than Kirby, Jimbo, Jeremy, those guys.
I know it's got to be about more than one player, but how much of it is because the best player of the state at a position you coach 90 miles from campus is going to Auburn?
Well, I mean, you look at
and said he didn't have a great relationship with Tracy Rocker.
Yeah, on the record.
When you go back to the last two classes and you look at Jay Hardy, and you look at who's our boy over there in Middle Tennessee that went to Kentucky,
Ripka.
Yeah, Trayvon Ripka, and then you go back to the last class and you talk about Bill Norton and Zion Logue and some of those players. I think to a man, they've all kind of told people that they never felt like they had a good enough relationship with Tracy Rocker. And whether that's your area as an area recruiter or not, when you're that position coach, you've got to be more involved to have a better relationship with defensive linemen that Tennessee wants.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes it's easy, I think, to get caught up in the narrative when you just run down and look over a list that, hey, I actually think that you can make the argument that Will Friend did a better job on the recruiting trail this year than he did last year, even though they landed 2 quote-unquote 5 stars at the offensive line, because he was not critical in landing those guys. In that same vein, Tennessee landed a nice defensive line class this fall. But how much did Tracy have to do with that? Amari Thomas, Dominique Bailey, Tyler Barron, those are 3 legitimate 4-star prospects.
But they also had an historic year in state for defensive.
Oh, 100%. 100%.
I mean, they got 2, but they didn't clean up.
Right. But again, you look at what they got this year. I mean, Tracy Rocker's not the reason Omari Thomas came to Tennessee. If anything, Derek Ansley closed the deal on that one. Okay.
And David Johnson helped a lot there too.
Certainly, there's no question about that. But it's interesting because you're right. You look at lists and you say,
he
signed 2 5-star offensive tackles. Will Friend's a great recruiter. Not that Will Friend was bad for those guys last year, but he wasn't the catalyst.
He was in on Jimmy Holiday and pushing this staff on Jimmy Holiday before Jimmy Holiday had anything.
Right.
Before he had Mississippi State or Ole Miss, which is the 2 in-state schools, before he had anybody in the Big 12. He was the one saying, this is a freak athlete. We've got to be in on him. Right. And then, of course, he did a really good job with Beckwith.
Well, and then James Robinson kind of beating out Auburn and State for him. It's just easy. And I think the same thing, honestly, could happen, depending on how it unfolds in next year's class with a guy with T. Martin. I mean, I think, T was involved in Jalen Hyatt and some of the other guys, but you run down Tennessee's receiver list. I think a lot of other guys, as Jeremy Pruitt noted on National Signing Day, had a hand in recruiting those kids. So just wanted to kind of throw that out.
Well, I think the other thing too, when you look at all this, the 2 on-field staff changes. We'll get to the 3rd change in a minute, but the 2 on-field staff changes.
Sure.
This was not a surprise. None of these were a surprise to Jeremy Pruitt because he had a hire in place.
Within moments.
I mean, basically before some of them even got announced. He had a deal. I mean, look. Not saying he knew Rump was going to get the Texans job, a month ago or 6 or 8 weeks ago, but he knew if Rump left, he was going Shelton Felton.
Yeah, and Shelton Felton was on campus on Monday.
Right.
Interviewing, and which, it was a done deal anyway, but interviewing, using the air quotes.
But my point being, he wasn't stunned or shocked by it because he had Brumbaugh hired, he had Shelton Felton hired because he knew that was a possibility. And I think that's a positive sign for a guy in charge of your football program that, hey, if these positions come open, I know what direction I want to go, And he was decisive with these two. He took a little longer with Jay, but Jay was always at the top of his priority list. It was about whether he was going to pay that much money for it.
Well, that and how everything else was going to fall. Was Scherer going to leave, which would allow him to move Niedermeyer to defense and promote Joe Ossovet to tight ends? I mean, it was a huge, kind of connect the dots type deal. Before he was able to make that move with Jay.
The only real surprise is that Jeremy would actually, and Jeremy's been a lot better with the media. He's a lot more comfortable in front of microphones and cameras. But, much like Phillip, I think, got caught up last week at the recruiting celebration, I was surprised that, the comment that came out when Jeremy was fairly emphatic. He was asked about his staff, and, he was like, well, these guys chose to be here, and they turned down other jobs, and, we like what we got. Well, all knowing. Now the Drew Hughes deal is a little bit different, but knowing that Rocker did not have a contract and that Rumpf was still making phone calls, that comment did surprise me a little bit because clearly, as you just evidenced, Jeremy had guys lined up. I mean, he was ready to make a move. But it's also pretty fascinating that speaks to again the tribalism of college football. It's easy to look from one fan base to another and point out flaws or laugh, about the movement or whatever. But Jeremy Pruitt called his original, his inaugural staff one of the best staffs in America, and it's got 2 guys left from it. And that's not that surprising in the way that the movement goes these days. And it won't be surprising, frankly, if one of those 2 guys is not here next year either. Well, that's just the way it works.
Well, and that's the thing. That's where Clemson's the anomaly. And the thing for Tennessee fans to understand, Rob, is the whole heyday of Phillip Fulmer, where they had all the staff continuity, that's just not the way college football works anymore. Phillip had 7 years where he didn't turn anybody over.
And should have.
And probably should have, but at point being, back then people weren't moving around as much as they are now, and the money wasn't there. It's a different, multi-year deals, some coaches are getting 3-year deals. There's titles out there, and there's so much money being paid by so many people.
What did the SEC give out last week? $46 million a school, which is getting ready to go up. You can finagle yourself a $200,000 raise with a couple phone calls. That just wasn't the case 10, 12 years ago.
It's a total
did not exist.
Yeah. Total different world, no question about that. All right, let's talk. We got those 2 are, with Brumbaugh, they haven't been formally announced, but that's the direction everything's going there. And Sheldon Felton's already on campus and all those things. The question now is the move of Drew Hughes from the position at Tennessee to South Carolina. What does Jeremy Pruitt do there? Because I think that's a critical hire. I think in the landscape of recruiting, where you're trying to be in front, you're trying to early eval these things, I think that's an important decision for Jeremy Pruitt, as important as any of his on-field guys in a lot of ways.
I made the argument on the radio on Monday that I think after your strength and conditioning coordinator and your offensive defensive coordinator, the player personnel role is probably the next most important.
Setting your board and recruiting, and as Brent said, early evaling, and just the fact that they've gotten in ahead on Jimmy Callaway and certain. We always use Callaway as the example, but there have been others, where they kind of get ahead of the curve a little bit, and then, granted, it's a struggle to hold on to some guys sometimes, but you'd rather be early than late.
But there's also been cases where they've been late as well.
It is, but philosophically with this staff, and that's why this hire is going to be important too. Tennessee has offered more prospects than any team in the country in the last 2 years since Jeremy Pruitt's been here.
Well, and if you want to know how important...
And that's grind and tape.
Right. If you want to know how important this job is, I think 6 places in the SEC have turnover at this position. Texas A&M comes to Georgia and gets Georgia's guy and basically essentially almost doubles his money. The amount of money that's being paid at this position now has gotten kind of crazy. It's got funny titles and everything else to it. But the SEC, with its cash cow of funds and slush funds out there, are paying this position more than anybody else around the country.
And I don't want to minimize it, but I also think this is a spot where you've got an incredibly deep pool of candidates of young, hungry dudes that are want to get into this field and will work 20-hour days. We'll be in the office 7 days a week. I think you're going to have a lot of candidates. Now, obviously, some are going to be better than others, but man, they'll be. Again, I think it'll be a deep pool.
Well, and I think the interesting thing with this position too is more than even other positions, Jesse, you got to have trust.
You got to have
the head coach has to trust this guy. He's got to have firm belief, because look, I've said it before on this podcast, I'll say it again. The most valuable thing a head coach has is not his bank account, it's not his salary, it's not his car he drives, it's not how big his office is. It's the 25 that he uses every year. Use them wrong, you don't have any of that other stuff. Use them right,
you can overcome things.
You got a chance to hoist a trophy.
Yeah, and then
how you
there's
use the
symbiosis
25
between those two individuals, and it's going to be. I mean, we'll see how deep this candidate pool is, because Jeremy identified Drew as his guy. This was Jeremy's first chance to be a head coach, and he went through the phone book, and that's who he interviewed when he was still coaching at the national championship game for Alabama. So this is going to be a critical hire, and he's going up against, obviously, Georgia's looking for a guy. Lane, just took South Carolina's guy, which is how this movement happened. But we'll see. It's going to be critical whichever direction Tennessee goes here.
Yeah. I think it will be, again, is there another, quote, Alabama guy out there? Is it an SEC guy that you go with? I mean, there's a guy at Mississippi State in Matt Wilson, who was at Tennessee at one point, who was at Indiana. Nice little roster that Indiana had put together for the bowl game. Is that a guy that you would have enough trust with, even though you don't know him, Austin? I think the trust factor, the comfort factor with Jeremy Pruitt is going to be interesting. That's why I don't think this hire will go fast the way the Monday hires went with Shelton, Felton, and Brumbaugh.
No, I think he will take his time, because you have to hire the best guy. You guys have hit the nail on the head. Because when you're trying to get out in front of things in recruiting, with it being so important, if you hit on the 25, as you said, you can overcome this or that with your staff. You can't overcome, bad evals and being late to the party. I mean, if you're late in this state, they hold it against you. If you're late in other states, you're behind likely the home state school, which you can tell to get. So you got to be ahead of the curve. And so I think that, there are different guys you could look at. I mean, who's he worked with at Alabama? There are people that have been in the building over here before that have a tie to the area. So, there's a couple of different names out there that are floating about to see who replaces Drew.
Yeah, and I don't think this is something that's going to happen fast. I think what is going to be interesting with this job at Tennessee, and I wonder if we're going to see this around the conference a little bit more, it's never been a contract job. It's always been an at-will employee.
I mean, they are getting more money now, but they're not getting guaranteed.
Is that the next growth? Because, I mean, these guys have agents now. Okay, when you think about it, as crazy as that is to say, I mean, this was a job that, guy was making $60,000, 7-8 years ago to run the recruiting office. Jobs are paying over $200,000 a year now in some places. And they've got titles and they've got agents. Is the next growth in this league a multi-year deal for people?
Logical. I mean, they're obviously putting an incredibly more emphasis on the position. I mean, if you're going to invest that much money in it, and guys that you think are that important, I mean, it just makes sense that you're going to try to make the job more attractive.
Well, I tell you what, if I were in that role of recruiting deal, I would want a multi-year deal, because you're so attached to that coach. It used to be in the past when you had, well, I'll use Scott Altizer as an example. I mean, he worked that office for Philip Fulmer, he worked it for Lane Kiffin, and then he came back and worked it for Derek Dooley. He worked it in three different capacities. Yeah. These days anymore, most of these guys are attached with the head coach. So, and a new coach coming in has his guy that he wants to bring. So those guys a lot of times are at the mercy of a head coach firing, and there's no safety net for them. So I'm sure the guys in that position are certainly wanting multi-year deals or wanting it to go in that direction.
Much like Austin Thomas had to be, just for all the jokes about the GM title. I mean, for Ole Miss to hand out a GM title to their new guy this week, I mean, Austin Thomas had to be just super thrilled, because you start establishing that as a role in college football, and then multiple people have it. You start establishing multi-year deals. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But I mean, like, he's been the only one that's had that title. Now all of a sudden somebody else has that title, so now it's establishing that as a title in college football. Same thing here. You start establishing multi-year deals for those guys. It's hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube, once all that starts happening around college football, because everybody's going to expect it.
Yeah, certainly. There's no doubt about that.
Well, and the biggest, I would say that what seems to be the most pertinent topic on the board, AP, is why would Hughes leave Jeremy for what is perceived as a struggling boat
Well,
at South Carolina. But the frankly, as Hubs just alluded to, a lot of these guys are connected, through various friendships and.
well, and if you leave on good terms, who's to say that however many years from now, those two, Jeremy and Drew don't get back together, much like Will and Drew are getting back together now. And I think they have left on really good terms. Drew's got family down in Charleston and in other parts of South Carolina. And again, multi-year deals and contracts. That's at the end of the day, man. Money, multi-year money. That's a game changer for a guy that's an off-the-field role.
And especially with the prospect that maybe Muschamp does get fired and they still owe you this money, and you're not even working.
Yeah, you got a year to go find your next.
If he's
place.
making $190 here, let's say they gave him, I don't know what he's making, okay, but let's say they gave him $250 at South Carolina on a 2-year deal. That's $500,000. So a guy like Drew Hughes, who is a grinder, he loves to watch tape. This guy just kind of is eat up with trying to find the next diamond in the rough type player. Guys like him are not going to have trouble getting a job. A year from now or 2 years from now, Drew Hughes is going to pick up the phone and be able to get another job in this league or at the Power 5 level, depending on where he wants to work. So, I think from Drew Hughes' perspective, this is a win-win.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. By the way, quickly about Blue Water Climate Control, then we'll get into a couple of recruiting things.
Hey, can you tell Blue Water to quit all the rain? What's going on with this?
Hey, when your system breaks, you want a company that will get there fast and do the right repair the right way the first time. Blue Water responds to more than 90% of their calls the same day they're received. Blue Water offers 24-hour service, and all the technicians are trained and certified. Call them today at 865-299-2290. Mention Volquest, and you'll get a diagnostic for free. You'll get a diagnostic look at things for free with your repairs. That's 865-299-2290. All right, if you're Jimmy Brumbaugh and you're Shelton Felton, Austin and Jesse, who are the first phone calls you're making for Tennessee for recruiting? Let's get into recruiting a little bit that way, because it's a dead period. Don't get out guys on town. If you're, to me, if you're Jimmy Brumbaugh, I'm calling Peyton Page. Right?
Yeah, because having come off that Clemson visit.
Well, and he's talked about Tennessee. He's also talked about liking Rocker. He's the one that's mentioned Rocker, but Tennessee's been in there.
OG.
Don't you think you're making initial
I call
contact there?
Jabbar. I call the Ritzy kid. I call Peyton Page. I call the first phone call I make if I am him is Dietrich Pennington.
Right.
To me that's
Dietrich Pennington is the in-state West Tennessee defensive
plays
lineman.
Evangelical Christian.
That's going to have Alabama, Ole Miss,
Clemson.
Mississippi State, Clemson, everybody known the man involved with him. So you're making a call there.
Yeah, I'm definitely making a call there. I think that's super important. And then if I know that Ossovet's kind of got that one on lockdown, but if I call Damian Robinson if I'm Shelton Felton. That's going to be a guy you would coach.
Well, and look,
Yeah, then I'd
Felton's-
add Jeremiah Williams to that list, Dylan Brooks.
Shelton Felton's brought here to try to land some of these guys they haven't been able to land the last couple of years at that position. Now, again, you got geographical regions and all those things. I'm not saying it's all on Shelton Felton, but to help try to close the deal on a position of need that Tennessee's not landed, quote, the big fish on the last couple of years.
Yep. Yeah. I have a piece coming out on this about just kind of their positional priorities. I think Javon Nelson, in-state defensive lineman, is another guy that'll get an early call. Trevelli Price is another defensive lineman Tennessee likes a lot. So
Where's Price from?
He's from North Carolina.
Okay, so another North Carolina guy, which you're going to see Tennessee heavily involved there. Remember this about Shelton Felton. The ties to Georgia are important. Not that you're going to go to South Georgia and beat out Auburn and Florida State a ton, but when you talk about what this staff has lost, Kevin Sherrer, Georgia ties. Tracy Rocker had recruited in Georgia. Chris Rump had Georgia ties in recruiting. They needed to get some Georgia ties back on the staff. I think that's another thing that was attractive for Jeremy Pruitt with Shelton Felton, is because he's got the ties in the state of Georgia, don't you?
Yeah, and ties in the high school community down there more than anything else. He's coached high school ball in the state of Georgia, and a lot of people think fondly of him down there. So I know there's some people that are in the state of Georgia that are excited that Shelton's getting a Power 5 gig.
And has ties in Tennessee. I mean, he's got to start with the box.
Yeah,
So.
and there'll be some prospects down that way to know in the couple coming years as well. So some interesting ties there. I guess one other note we should discuss a little bit. Chip Long is on staff as an analyst at Tennessee. I think, guys, I think this is the direction you're seeing these positions go. Is let's get the quote fired coach who's got a big buyout from another school, and let's get him here to, kind of rehab his career, and we're going to learn and glean from him. I'm not saying that Chip Long is going to be the next anything at Tennessee, but he's getting paid by Notre Dame. So instead of that being a young man's deal, getting his first break, bring in a guy who's an experienced guy. He knows the offense. He knows Jim Chaney. He knows tight ends to help Joe Ossovat a little bit there. I think that move makes a lot of sense if you're Jeremy Pruitt. Don't you guys?
I mean, it's
totally
the John
do.
Lilly 2.0. That's what this is. I mean, it's kind of it's a veteran coach who has experience, even some play calling experience, obviously, and he's going to be able to kind of help. Now, Ossovat's not young, but not, kind of a more experienced tight ends coach behind him.
Yeah,
Much like what happened year one with Niedermeyer and Lilly.
Right, and he was in town back, a month or so ago,
Yeah,
a month and a half ago.
January 3rd and 4th.
But-
He was in the day after Tennessee beat Indiana. He got together with Brian Niedermeyer in Knoxville and spent a couple of days here.
Yeah, just kind of talking ball and, clinicking a little bit, and then obviously as a result of that, he ends up landing here as an analyst. So I guess about full at that position, unless they create some more positions, right? I mean, if Todd Watson's going to go into an analyst role, which we believe because he has hired a football ops guy, I guess maybe he's got one more analyst role to fill.
Yeah, he lost. He lost the one guy that went to Mercer that helped me Niedermeyer with tight ends, Kevin O'Brien.
Yeah.
They lost Caleb Cox to Eastern Kentucky, and then of course
Ossovat, so 3 there, but he's replaced 2 of those with obviously Chip Long and with Todd Watson. We believe going to move into one of those roles, given that the fact that they've hired an ops guy from Mississippi State, which would go into the role that Todd Watson was in as well. So plenty of movement, plenty of shaking going on the football front. We'll continue to cover all for it. Jesse, you're the one who's had the over and under. Are they done? On the field staff?
Yes, I think.
Okay, so you're not.
Are
you going to set the over and under at 0 now?
This is their 2020 staff for now.
This is the 2020 staff for sure. I agree with you 100%. All right, let's jump to hoops right quick. Rob Lewis. Tennessee fought, scrapped, and did what they could. They couldn't make. I don't want to put it all on Jordan Bowden. It would have been interesting if he'd made that 3 and cut it to a 1-possession game. With I guess 3 minutes or so to go in that game. It got away from them after that point. Defensively, Tennessee was good. This team they are what they are offensively, and that's just what it is.
I mean, they're just going to have. Kentucky shot 54% against them. Tennessee's not going to win games like that. I mean, they're not good enough on offense. It was a lot more fun to talk about the assistant coach changes.
Any chance, and I know he doesn't like it, but any chance against some teams that don't shoot the ball well from the perimeter that you see, any kind of zone defense to keep the ball in front of them better.
I think he may throw it out there a little bit, but this is what Rick will tell you. They're so. Everything is so new to Santiago and Plazic that they don't have time to work on zone in practice because they're working. These kids, Santiago in particular, barely knows the basics of what they're doing on either end of the floor. So adding, he's still trying to learn what to do in their base man-to-man defense, where you're supposed to help, where his help's coming from, where you're supposed to funnel guys. And so I think Rick is scared to throw anything more out there. So yes, I think you'll see it here and there as a wrinkle, coming out of timeouts, an inbounds play, something like that. But I don't think you're going to see him play it for long stretches. Now, I could be wrong, but I'm not. I would.
I don't think it would be a difference in the record. I'm not suggesting that.
I would do it if I was him. Especially, and God bless him. I'm not picking on Vescovi because I think what he's done, just being thrown into the deep end of the pool, is remarkable. But when Kentucky needed a bucket the other day, they isolated him at the top of the key on. Quickly or Higgins or Maxey, and he got blown by every time for 3 or 4 straight buckets or fouls, and I'd play some zone in those kind of situations.
Yeah, I just think that I think it's hard. where he's at right now, it's hard for him to keep the ball in front of him. And it may always be hard for him to keep the ball in front of him.
He'll get better. But right now,
But you can't rely on the ponds flying 15 feet in through the air to block that shot every time. He did some, but I was just, like you said, you got to isolation, put yourself in trouble that way.
And I don't think this team's underachieving. I mean, they're just, in fact, they may be overachieving a little bit. I didn't think there was any way they were going to win that game to Alabama last week. And they wouldn't if Alabama had a clue of how to play basketball. But
yeah, so I don't know that I would say overachieving. They got a little help at the Alabama. But the thing about this team is they're playing hard.
They're tough.
In some areas, they've shown some improvement. Fulkerson's now put 2 quality games back to back, or maybe 3 or the last 4.
Fulkerson's turned in. He's their most reliable option just because of how bad Jordan is struggling. And Fulkerson didn't. He struggled from the field on Saturday, but he drew 11 fouls on Kentucky, which is pretty amazing that you'd ever think that John Fulkerson could offensively, do that in a game. He's come a long way.
And a guy maybe you double team now.
Yeah, I think if you're scouting Tennessee, you probably do think about double teaming. Everybody won't have to, and Kentucky didn't have to. Some teams won't.
But they did a little bit.
But Jordan's just. He's in 10 SEC games. He's 8 for 57 from 3-point range, 14%, and you just can't.
It certainly looks like when he shoots it, he's hoping it goes in. He doesn't have any belief it's going in.
No, and what I think makes it tougher on him mentally is he knows he's got to keep shooting. Because the scoring's got to. Vescovi can get hot if you leave him open, but I just, and we've talked about it. We're deep enough into the season. It's a little bit of a broken record. They just don't have anybody that you can throw the ball to who's going to beat his man off the dribble and go get you a bucket, draw a foul, draw a defender, and. Jordan Bone could do that anytime down the court.
Lamonte could do that.
Lamonte could do it. Admiral could do it a different way, by putting the shoulder into somebody and getting into the paint. And Grant, if you could just get the ball to him, you were going to get a quality shot, or he was going to the free throw line.
Tough week for Tennessee, though. They got Arkansas tonight with an Arkansas team that's hard to figure. That Arkansas team that needs wins
and lost Joe. That's a big loss for them.
Big loss for them, but. A team in dire need of some wins.
Yeah, lost a couple, if I'm not mistaken, back-to-back overtime games. So their season would look a lot different if they'd gone the other way.
They're not a lock for the tournament that a lot of people thought they would be. There's 16 wins, but a losing record in conference play.
Now they're 4-6 in league play.
Yeah, tough. This is one that they need. Not that this was a great RPI resume for them, but you got to get over 500 in conference play.
And from Tennessee's standpoint, I do not think they're making the tournament. But if they have any designs on it, they cannot lose another home game.
Yes.
They got to beat Arkansas tonight, Vandy next week,
Florida, and Auburn. Yeah, you got to sweep.
You got to win all 4 of those. I think and then probably still one on the road somewhere. I think that's too much for this squad. But we'll see. Right now, they still have a fighting chance, but cannot lose another home game. And I think the road trip to South Carolina looks tough. I think South Carolina is as improved as anybody in the league over the last month, certainly from when we saw them.
But if you can find, as we talked about on TV, if you can find a way to win the next 3 and be sitting at 8-5 in league play and 16-10 overall, at that point
you got a shot.
You have a shot, and at that point, with 5 to go, you assured yourself of being over 500 before the tournament, which means the likelihood is you're not going to go 0-5 those last 5, and which would basically, I think, lock you into the NIT. Right now, if depending on this tough schedule down the stretch, they could technically fall out of that.
To paraphrase my VQ colleagues, 100%, they could fall out of the NIT.
But if you can win these next 3, it becomes almost a lock, I think.
I agree.
Yeah,
and they're winnable, but I don't think they win at South Carolina on Saturday. I just don't. Arkansas's diminished with the injury to Joe. That was probably their second best player, maybe their best player, and you got to take care of business tomorrow night or tonight against Arkansas.
Yeah, in a league that's just not going to get as many people in the league as they think that everybody thinks
they got 3 locks. I'd say Mississippi State may be a lock by now. So 4. I don't see more than 4. Florida, I don't know what in the world's going on down there.
Well, started in the top 5. Now they.
They're hard to figure. Georgia may have the best player in the country.
And they're
in terms of NFL draft, and they're going nowhere.
Georgia's the king, and they get up by 18 every game, and they blow the lead and lose.
Florida's arguably the most talented team in the league. And they're 6-4.
Yeah, they just haven't come together at all in any way, shape, or form. That's for sure. So, plenty of basketball coverage, plenty of recruiting coverage, plenty of football coverage. Jesse will have more on Tennessee's football recruiting needs coming up Already had that earlier today. Obviously, we'll have a little baseball coverage for you as well. But that's going to do it for the Blue Water Climate Control Volquest.com podcast for Rob Lewis, Jesse Simonton, Austin Price,
and Addison Price, who sat along and played on her iPad the entire time we taped the podcast. Addison, you want to tell everybody at Volquest hello?
And she shook her head many times at things that were said in this broadcast.
Can you say
probably
what's up,
like many
Gator Dog?
people listening to it have done?
Can you say $9.95?
That's going to do it. Have a great Tuesday, everybody.